And thank you, Christina, for preparing a script for me. I don't always get these, but it's nice to have it. So we shall begin. Due to the shelter in place and COVID-19, the Administrative and Projects Committee has chosen Zoom as its meeting platform. During the meeting, please mute your mic. If you haven't already done so, please mute your mic now. Christina, take roll call, please.
Okay, Chair Budd.
Here.
Committee Member Arnrich.
Here.
Committee Member Taylor.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Geringer.
Here.
And Committee Member Pierce.
Here.
Everybody is here.
Thank you. I will request any committee questions and comments on an agenda item. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand using the raise the hand featured Zoom. And also, I will honor this if you want to do that instead. Christina or I will call on you. Staff will unmute your mic. After you speak, staff will remute your mic and lower your hand. I will request any public comment. If anyone from the public attending the meeting wishes to speak during an agenda item, please raise your hand or press *9 if you're on the phone. Christina or I will call on you to speak and unmute your mic. You will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, your mic will be automatically remuted and your hand will be lowered. If an action is required on an agenda item, the chair will call the vote. Christina will conduct a roll call vote. When Christina calls on you, staff will unmute your mic, you'll vote, and then staff will remute your mic. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Christina, have we received any public comment?
We have not, but I have Julie that has a comment.
Yes.
Yes. Julie has a note on her agenda.
Unmute, Julie.
You're muted.
Sometimes that space bar doesn't work. All right. I have in big red letters on my agenda under public comment that today is Randy Iwasaki's birthday. Happy birthday, Randy. Yay!
Thank you. Yeah, thank
And
you
it's
very
better than being on the Bay Bridge, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
That wasn't on the agenda, but as chair, I will allow it.
Well, it's under public comment, Mr. Chair. I have another comment actually I'd like to add because you just had to read a kind of a semi-awkward script. And I'd like to make a suggestion. MTC staff actually had a really brilliant idea. They recorded a video that is the entry to the meeting. I would advise you to go look at the beginning of any of the MTC meetings, at the very first meeting of their series, and watch what they did, and let's copy it for us, making it appropriate for us, and then have somebody read that so that all we have to do is cue the video, it plays, the chair doesn't have to do anything else. Because it gets really awkward reading the rules and trying to explain it and making it make sense and all of that. It was really, really well done. And it's got all the disclaimers we need, and it was well done. So take a look at that and see if we can't poach that idea and do it for ourselves. So that's the end of my public comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment.
Mr. Chair,
I've already done that. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, you have someone from the public that would like to speak.
Okay.
Dave Campbell, you have your hand up.
Somebody unmute him, please.
Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bikey Spay. Thanks for. All right, how about now? Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. Hey, I want to let y'all know we're working with many organizations under the name of Voices to improve public transit, and there's lots of aspects to this, not just recovery and getting more funding for transit operations, but to make sure that their safety precautions are exemplary. And I've had some very heated conversations with elected officials who feel like they're doing enough while we don't feel like they're doing enough. And I just wanted to bring this to y'all's attention, not to be antagonistic about this, but because I had a heated conversation with a Contra Costa elected official who shall go unnamed, I challenged the person to get on the bus, ride a county connection bus, ride a Tri-Delta bus, ride an AC Transit bus, WestCat, the local bus service of your choosing, and decide for yourself, are enough customers on these buses wearing masks? If not, should we be providing free masks? Is there hand sanitizer available as customers get on the buses? Are drivers wearing masks? These sorts of things. Are we providing paid sick leave to drivers so they don't show up sick? And are we openly reporting all this to the public as we should have been doing back in March when the pandemic started? So just a quick heads up what Voices is doing. We're not trying to be antagonistic here. We're certainly not trying to scare people away from transit. We're trying to push public officials to make transit as safe as you would want your schools for your children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a public comment? Okay, I don't see any. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from June 4th, 2020. Are there any changes, comments from the committee?
Pierce
so-
moves.
Yes, okay. If anyone from the public like to speak on the minutes? Okay, did I had a motion from Pierce, right?
Correct.
Geringer second.
Who's the second?
Geringer.
Okay, second from Geringer. Christina, please do a roll call vote.
Okay, so I have a motion from committee member Pierce and a second from
Geringer.
Vice Chair Geringer. Do I have, I'm trying to find my script here. It looks like the motion passes anonymously.
Haven't voted yet.
I have a vote, please.
Okay.
Committee member Arnrich,
Yes.
committee member Pierce, committee member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously by a majority of committee members, all committee members. So it passes. Sorry for.
I want to know how you knew it was unanimous before you called the vote.
Say that again?
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any changes, comments from the committee on the consent calendar?
I have a question.
Anybody want to pull an item? Julie.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about item 13, the audit by Macias, Genie, and O'Connell for the Gomentum issue. I just wanted to ask a question. Are we going to get a report back before the end of the contract? It didn't read like there was a report coming to us anytime soon. And I think the contract goes through the end of 2021. So I was hoping that we would get some kind of an intermediate update on their work.
I'll answer that question. This is Brian Kelleher, Chief Financial Officer for the authority. This contract is separate than the audit contract that we have. This is as you know, it is specifically going to look at the funding that we received from the state of California and making sure that it was used appropriately. The contract has many levers built into it. So as they start to do the analysis, if another door opens, they have the budget capacity, they have the ability to go in and look at other items that are in there. There will be a report that comes back. I will bring it back as an acceptance, as just information item. We will bring it back if there's an issue. We will come back with resolutions, a resolution to what the issue may be and how we're going to fix it. We want 100% transparency with this so that we can get additional grants. We want to be ahead of the curve to ensure that this relationship with all parties is good and you guys accept it.
That's what I was hoping for. I was hoping that we would get maybe 3 months in or something like that, or maybe even less, a report back that yes, everything's kosher, or we had a hiccup here and we need to file another something, or whatever's going on. But this is a review of where we've been as well as going forward. So I was hoping to get verification that we've been on the right track. So I hope we'll hear that. Thank you.
Newell, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I had a couple of questions, and this is for Brian on quarterly sales tax. You know, it's good news for what we look like we're coming out for the final 1920. What do you see now, given that the state delayed almost a whole quarter? How bad, based on our estimates? Obviously, we've got money that we had. I want to say excess money. There's revenue there that we can hold over to help us get through the 2021 budget. But what do you see as the forecast compared to what we were thinking it was before?
Well, as in the staff report, we were so pleasantly surprised in talking with HDL verbally. They were surprised at the numbers that came in. We thought a lot of individuals that file their taxes would be extending for the deferral. In looking at the payments that we received, there was a lot of deferrals from the first quarter that we received in the second quarter. It totaled about $5 million that should have been allocated to a prior quarter that we received. So the way the state of California sends the money out is the late payments come in, and then what they do is they pay you in the next cycle of the payments that come in. So moving forward, I have a meeting with HDL on September 30th. What they'll be bringing to me is the analysis for the fourth quarter for our fiscal year, the April through June. At that point, we'll be able to see who our strong sales tax providers are. There's a lot of large agencies like the Walmarts, the Targets, the Amazon, the car dealerships, where I believe we did really well, that'll offset some of the other ones. And at that point in time, we'll have a better idea of who hasn't paid their taxes in the last couple of months. We'll be able to do some analysis and see what sectors are outperforming the ones that we had anticipated would slow down a little bit. And I'll be able to give you guys a better idea of what our budget's going to be for next year. Again, it is, icing on the cake that we received that much money, but as we all know, we don't know what the near future and the long-term future is for sales tax and how the retail sectors and restaurants will be affected.
Great, Brian, thanks. And I just hope the caution is, and maybe when it gets to the board, is just to make sure that we have a consensus, is that we use that money, that the funds that came up greater than expected, to help smooth out next year and the year beyond. So thank you. The other one, next couple of questions are for Ivan. Highway 4680, we have almost $1 million in change orders, 2 change orders. One for $570,000 for because of the tapering and that's converting to handwork. And then an AE change order for engineering services for 400,000. Those are two big chunks of change. What's going on?
Yes, good morning,
Oh, there you go.
commissioners. Ivan Ramirez, Director of Construction. So yeah, so there's this is a project that has been brought up to the board a couple of times in the past regarding in my previous updates regarding some challenges that we have encountered. And the construction change order that you mentioned regarding the taper of the barrier rail, it also includes the changes in transitioning between different types of surface treatments between concrete and asphalt, between approach lab and asphalt, several changes that were not really clear in the contract drawings, and we had to then address them in the field. So the project, hasn't changed much from what we talked about. There's a couple of noteworthy things that I'm going to bring up in my update, as I promised to bring it to the board towards the end of the construction season, towards October or November. One of them is that there's been some construction issues that have caused one of the bridges to crack. That has to do with basically the field team didn't follow the provisions stipulated in the contract documents as to the sequence of events that need to be followed. As for whatever reason, a step was missed, and that resulted in some cracking of the concrete. And in addition to that, based on some field investigations, we have also found that some rebar, some reinforcement steel that goes along with the concrete that has been either not installed properly, or the wrong size has been installed, or the wrong type has been installed. And those have, of course, when we come with issues like that, we have to engage the designer of record so they can help us mitigate those conditions in the field. And that is to address partly the 400,000 A&E that you mentioned. In addition to that, I would like to mention that contract was not really completely funded. We knew going into construction that the contract was going to need an amendment because the amount of money put into that contract was not sufficient. And in addition to that, there's been a continuing of things that have come up related to design, and also some of initiatives that the contractor has asked us to implement. So in order for us to implement some of those initiatives, we have to engage the services of the designer. I think that those initiatives that have been proposed and we have implemented with the contractor have the effect of improving construction, either saving some time or inconveniences to the public. This is something that we do in the normal business, the course of business. But in general, and there's one more thing, that there's been some good news too. We were supposed to install some huge, and I'm talking huge, concrete boxes along the side of the road, and those concrete boxes the purpose is to collect rainwater, so it doesn't all come out into the de-icing into the creeks all at one time. It's supposed to seep it really slow. Well, we encountered some very, very difficult soil conditions that would have increased the price of installing those pipes significantly. And with the help of the executive director, we contacted the water board, and it's their permit that we have to abide. And that was the reason why we were installing those pipes. Well, with their help and the help of our designers, we have been able to eliminate a large chunk of those boxes that we need to install, and we're going to mitigate them in a different manner, so we still don't let the water all at the same time get into the creek. We're still going to have some measures, but the end result is that we're going to have to do it on the surface, so we don't have to excavate, or their water board is allowing enough flexibility for us to be able to install them into the future with a future project or a future special project. And that also require extensive use of the designers, because again, they have to redesign, and they also have to propose solutions to the board for them to be able to accept. So in conclusion, the project continues to encounter challenges. The construction work, it's going at a good pace. So I think that there's going to be very minimum impact to the schedule overall. So we're going to have a good completion. But it has been a challenging project, and it continues to be. So it requires a lot of attention on my part. I hope that answers the question. But again, I'm going to provide a full update towards the end of the construction season, hopefully October or November.
Great. Ivan, always, I know we all appreciate your expertise and your forward thinking. So I appreciate that update. One last one that was related to number 9. There was a $350,000 change order for construction design services, but it extends the contract out to 12/31/23. So this is for the 680 project that we're doing right now, and we've accelerated that project. So why are we doing a change order that pushes this project out past what we have now cut back on a year off of that schedule, but we're pushing the design schedule out another year? It seems like we're heading opposite directions.
So that's a very good question, Commissioner. So what's going on here is that originally we were supposed to follow up with a planting landscape project, and then with its companion plant establishment periods, similar to what we did on the Danville project. And what's happened is that we decided to instead incorporate it as a change order under this contract. So what we're doing is we engage the designer HDR, and they're in the process currently of designing that plant establishment contract. And therefore we need to extend it because that plant establishment project is going to be about 2 years after this project is completed. That's the reason why that contract is being extended, because we have additional scope that would have been done anyways in the future via a different contract, but we're doing it now as part of this contract as a change order.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Motion by Arnrich, second by Pierce. Call the roll, please.
Okay, I'm going to get it right this time. So I have a motion by Arnrich, a second by Pierce, and I'm going to do a vote. Committee member Arnrich,
Yes.
committee member Pierce,
yes.
committee member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a legislative update. Lindsay Willis will present this item.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. It's nice to see all your faces again. And I'm actually going to leave the heavy lifting to our federal and state advocates because we have both of them on the line with us this morning. So I know Mark Watts is available on the phone, and we have Jason Ty and Gus Maples from Ty Ginsburg and Associates. So perhaps we'll start with the federal update this morning. So Jason and Gus, I'm not sure which one of you wants to provide the overview, but feel free.
Great, good morning, almost good afternoon here on the East Coast. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I will actually let Gus do all the heavy lifting since he will be paying for my Social Security checks shortly. But I think one thing we would want to make a quick note of is that over the last year and a half, I think certainly last year, due to the leadership of the board, Lindsay and certainly Randy and the rest, Randy as a CEO and the rest of the team, kind of securing the 2 federal grants last year for a significant chunk of change was a very significant accomplishment on a number of innovative mobility projects. That was a pot that was very competitive, but I think I just wanted to make a note that even now, I think just last month, people still ask Lindsay and Randy and us for advice on how we did it. And so we still, we don't want to give away the secret sauce, But I think that goes to show that this pea shooter organization that Randy speaks of and Lindsay speaks of and the rest of the team really makes a difference in Washington, especially when it comes to these very competitive pots of money that are created. Now, next Congress, next year, 2021, 2022, from a global perspective, is going to be a watershed event. You probably saw that the House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, passed a $1.5 trillion infrastructure package that's very all-encompassing. Surface transportation, kind of bringing $500 billion of that pot to the table. That is essentially DOA in the Senate. I was just on the phone last week with Congressman DeFazio of Oregon, the chairman of the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, who was a good friend of ours, with Randy's and Lindsay's. And he has noted that he has spoken with Biden's transition team that is already forming in case he does win in November, as we all know, 2 months away. And one of the first elements that if Biden wins, that Mr. Biden and his team want to pass is a comprehensive infrastructure package in 2021. So I think that puts kind of hopefully a little bit of context of what's going to happen potentially the rest of this year, but really what it means for next Congress and what it means for transportation and CCTA. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Maples, the gentleman from Mississippi, who will be paying my Social Security very shortly. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gus. Gus?
Assuming that Social Security doesn't run out before you get to it. So as Jason alluded to, the House has done its work on the reauthorization of the FAST Act, the major long-term surface transportation program bill. Unfortunately, the Senate has not processed all of its components to that. They have passed the highway portion, but the transit and rail and safety programs still need to be written by their respective committees in the Senate. The current tea leaves look like there could be a possible 1-year extension of current programming to finish that process, get through everything. And that also gives a little time for potential changes in the political dynamic based on what happens in November. If control of the White House or Senate changes hands, the party coming into power will want to be able to put more of their imprint on that legislation. There's a bit of a similar dynamic for the regular annual appropriations bills. Current funding for the government also expires at the end of this month, just like the end of the FAST Act. And the House has passed a lot of their appropriations bills as well through the full House of Representatives, but the Senate has not been able to reach an agreement on policy kind of riders, they call them, to include in the spending bills. So they have not finished any of their appropriations bills thus far this year. Given the real delay on the Senate side of things, I was just talking to some former Appropriations Committee colleagues earlier this morning and would actually not be surprised if a possible continuing resolution for that goes into next year. Usually it goes to about December, and it wouldn't actually be surprising if it goes into next year, possibly the early spring, under the assumption that they would be working with the new president on that bill as well. The other kind of big ticket legislative item under consideration for the next couple of weeks before the end of the month is ongoing negotiations about a possible next stimulus package following the CARES Act and a couple of subsequent components to that were passed much earlier this spring and summer. Sometimes these deals can come together very quickly, and given the need for some of these must-pass bills by the end of the month, there's a possibility that something could be included there. However, the White House and Speaker Pelosi remain about $1 trillion apart on the top line funding level they want for that. So while a deal can come together fairly quickly, they're not close yet. That's sort of the state of play legislatively. for what we're foreseeing for the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if anyone has questions.
Questions, anyone? I don't see any.
Okay, well then maybe we will turn it over to Mark Watts, our state advocate, to give an update on what's happening at the state level.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I've got two essentially separate items to report on. First, I just want to give you an update what's going on our State Transportation Commission. And then there's about 4 or 5 high interest bills that we were following at the very end of the session I want to give you a brief update on. So first of all, the commission finally has its full complement of 9 members appointed by the governor, in addition to which there are appointees from the Assembly and Senate. The most recent appointment by Governor Newsom was Michelle Martinez from Orange County, formerly a Santa Ana City Council member. And we're not sure how this all worked out, but Lucy Dunn, who had been on the commission for several terms, is no longer on the commission, but Michelle Martinez is. I've not yet met her, but I'll be working with a couple of other commissioners to make that introduction so I can have the ability to work with her on your behalf. Hillary Norton, who had been appointed last year by Governor Newsom, was elected chair. So if for the first time in more than a year, we've got a fully complemented CTC with chair in slot and full membership. Beyond that, legislation, there were several interesting bills in spite of the efforts that were largely successful throughout the year to limit the kinds and range of bill topics due to the COVID, so they could focus on homelessness, housing, and COVID response. In the transportation arena, there were several efforts moving along that bore strict attention. First and foremost was the local bill by Senator Glacier, SB 1349, which deals with the county and the local city 2% cap, tax cap for local taxes. That bill did pass. It was presented on the floor of the Assembly by Assemblymember Grayson, so it had a nice showing from the county in terms of support, and it's on the governor's desk at this point in time. He's been not always as certain to predict how he'll do with these tax cap measures as Governor Brown was. Governor Brown was strongly in favor of providing relief in certain instances. So Senator Glacier has his work cut out for him. Another important and interesting bill, but I'm not sure how it's going to be received in the administration, SB 288 by Senator Wiener attempted to provide significant categorical relief from CEQA for major transit projects. It was winnowed down at the very end, and it applies to bike and ped, but it does still include new BRT, bus, or light rail transit as having the ability to access statutory exemptions. What was lost in the translation was some larger transit facilities were not were winnowed out, as I indicated. The bill had pretty good support throughout the legislature, even in its final form. But we think that the governor's CEQA advisors may have some issues with it. They may think it's too broad. See how that goes. Senator Bell carried SB 1351, which was an interesting attempt to provide some economic stimulus by accelerating the state's SHOT program projects. What he did is would have earmarked funds from the new car fee called the TIF and earmarked that for revenue bond payments, and the bill would authorize up to $5 billion in revenue bonds to accelerate projects. Some improvements were made to the bill. It allows Caltrans to nominate the projects, it limits the projects to come out of the 2020 adopted shop instead of some new project being brought in from left field. And then the cap of $5 billion was placed on the bill. So that's gone to the governor. Department of Finance was not really strongly interested in the bill. Caltrans cooperated with the senator, so I think it's got a 50-50 chance of being approved. Two last bills to talk about. One is AB 1286 by Mr. Murat Suchi that deals with shared mobility devices. It grants to cities and counties the ability to have agreements in place with mobility devices like scooters, bikes, and so forth. But it does require those agreements to include insurance requirements. The bill had been controversial until it was amended to remove a liability waiver restriction. And so cities and counties would still be able to enter into agreements with device operators if the device operator has liability waiver required in their contracts with the end user. So I think that's probably allows the bill to be more favorably considered by the governor. And the last bill I want to bring to your attention, which has got some favorable news for your local transit districts, AB 107, a budget trailer bill, provided an expansion for the State of Good Repair Transit Program to allow some of the funds to be used for operations, not just capital, during this period of COVID. It has a sunset of 2 years out, and it could be revisited at that point in time, but this would allow a little bit more flexibility in the use of revenues. And last but not least, the budget trailer bill, AB 107, does contain a NEPA assignment extension for another year that would allow transit agencies working in collaboration with the administration to assume NEPA responsibilities in California. So that brings my report to a close, and happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Bob?
Yes. Mark, judging by COVID and other things that have pretty much upset the apple cart on a lot of issues, do you see some particular dark clouds as we go into the oncoming year with elections, plus also budget restraints on anything with transportation that you see as really could be devastating?
I don't. It's been interesting. The fall off in fuel purchases we thought would have a more dramatic effect on revenues and therefore budgetary impacts. But frankly, it all came about the same time that we were about to exercise SB1's first series of growth elements that were applied to each of the taxes. So it was somewhat offsetting. Probably the best way to get a good feel for how things are going is the state shop program, which is their major maintenance program. It looks like it's moving ahead unassailed, and I think we're looking at maybe the state experiencing gas tax revenue impacts of about $1.5 billion over the 18 months starting last March until a year from then. So it looks like we will weather the COVID storm for now, and Caltrans is moving ahead, and there are large allocations issued by the CTC at the last commission meeting, and it looks like they've got another batch coming up at the next commission meeting. So it looks like we weathered the storm, but we're all keeping a watchful eye out.
Wow, that's better news than I thought you were going to present. Thank you so much.
Well, let me correct one last thing. There is bad news for local sales tax programs. It's, you know, I heard the presentation or discussion previously, but it's throughout the state. It is being experienced in terms of some suppressed level, particularly transit agencies that have depended upon local sales taxes, state sales tax on diesel, and the like. So transit agencies are seeing a real effect at the local level. And with that, I'll draw my comments to a close.
Okay, any other questions? I don't know if we have any action to take on this. Is there any?
We do not have any action, but I believe Randy had a question.
Okay.
Thank you. Mark, I don't have a question, but more of a comment. So we were on the Senator Bell legislation, proposed legislation. We were interviewed by both the Senate and the Assembly consultants on that bill. And I at one time, and I don't know if the final bill had it, but we were mentioned as an example of an agency that uses bonding to help accelerate. And the words I read were accelerating 25 years of construction into 10 years. And so it's a tool. Our only concern was if you're going to typically shop projects are asphalt, concrete overlays, and then servicing, and they don't last 25 years, 30 years. And so you're going to end up paying debt service on a project that you are doing either reconstructing, God forbid, or doing maintenance on. And really, we tend to use the bonding capacity only for concrete. So tunnels like the Caldecott or freeway widenings or new bridges.
Yeah, they did not. That was the one area that they did not add to the bill, which is the kind of a lifetime look at the projects. We had that concern, and the other concern was that the way the bill was originally drafted, it was up to the commission, and with the we were just concerned that there could have been projects selected out of thin air, which would have been a waste of time and energy if you're trying to accelerate it. So we did get the limitation that it had to come out of the 2020 shop. And I believe that Senator Bell has been discussing this matter with the director. And I think the director will be coming back with ideas about how to do what you just described, which is, you know, make a more usable life investment rather than short-term investments. I think the bill's got not much more than a 50-50 chance, however, of being signed by the administration. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Any other questions, comments? Again, I don't think there's any action coming out of this. I see Lindsay shaking her head. Okay, so we don't need to take a vote on that. And we will move to the next item, the Innovate 680 Project 8009, authorization to execute memorandum of understanding number 80.09.01 with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and California Department of Transportation, mutual responsibilities of the partners in delivering the Innovate 680 program. Tim Hale will present this item.
Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. My name's Tim Hale. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for projects, and I'll be presenting this item to you this morning. I do have a presentation. I wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of give an overview of the MOU, the structure, as well as a few updates on the Innovate 680 program. So I'm going to share my screen. So as all of you know, the Innovate 680 program is made up of 7 strategies, and staff and the authority have taken these 7 strategies, and we have integrated those strategies into six projects. And just a brief update on each of these projects. The Express Lane Completion Project has been evaluating a number of alternatives, especially at the State Route 24 interchange. The Part-Time Transit Lane Project has been developing a concept of operations, and I'll talk a little bit later of what that is, as well as coordinating with CHP. However, due to our reducing revenues with COVID-19, this project is currently on hold. The automated driving system grant, we're currently still scoping that, and we're meeting with FTA on a regular basis and expecting our NTP in the next couple months. And we'll bring that to the authority board for approval. The advanced technologies projects, we are developing a concept of operations and actually working on, in coordinating with Caltrans, a cooperative adaptive ramp metering project. And the Share Mobility Hub project has finished developing its vision white paper. And also due to COVID-19, this project is currently on hold. The ATC MTD grant is moving forward. We did receive our NTP earlier this year, and so we're in the process of developing the concept of operations and the system engineering documentation. So as you all know, a project like this, a program like this really cannot be done by just one agency. It takes a multitude of partners and active stakeholders in order to really execute this program. And so because of the number of stakeholders and partners that we have, the authority and staff has developed this governance structure. And the MOU that's before you memorializes this governance structure, primarily the blue highlighted section at the top, the executive steering committee, the program leadership team, the policy advisory committee, and the technical advisory committee. And so through this team, the partners have been graciously actually participating in this overall structure for the number of months now, while the MOU has been reviewed by our respective agencies, and now we're bringing it before you for final approval and execution. The executive steering committee has the policy and financial advisory body of the entire program, really responsible for approving the scope, budget, and schedule. And that is primarily made up of Randy Iwasaki, our executive director, the district director of Caltrans, Tony Tavares, and the deputy director, Andy Vermeer at Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The program leadership team is essentially the management body of the overall governance structure. It also comprises of the deputy directors from MTC, Caltrans, as well as the authority. And then the policy advisory committee is actually comprised of our local jurisdictions stakeholders, and that is the 6 cities along and the county along the corridor. And the policy advisory committee was formed by the Regional Transportation Planning Committee nominations from each of the local jurisdictions of elected officials. And the technical advisory committee is comprised of the staff at the local jurisdiction, and we use this body as really the governing structure of the overall program. And so we use this governance structure in terms of making decisions as policies and issues arise in the program. And it really starts at the corridor management team. The corridor management team is comprised of all of our consultants, the project delivery team, and then the strategic delivery team analyzes and looks at those issues as they arise and determine which way do they go in the overall governance structure. They either get elevated to the program leadership team or directly to the technical advisory committee. But all of the decision making is actually done in the middle or left column. And the policy advisory committee and technical advisory committee are truly just advisory to the program to be able to provide input and guide the overall program as we're developing Innovate 680. So we've had 2 policy advisory committee meetings, 5 technical advisory committee meetings, and we've had 3 program leadership team meetings to discuss issues and policies for the Innovate 680 program. One of the things that we've developed with this governance structure is the Innovate 680 program goals. This is Innovate 680, as you're aware, is a performance-based program, and with a performance-based program, you need goals and metrics. And so the goals are, I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are the program goals that were developed with the group and approved by the technical advisory and policy advisory committees. And these goals are really intended to guide the identification of program and project level performance metrics. And it's really helped to define the overall data needs of the program and really provide a roadmap for monitoring and evaluation of the overall program. Whoop, went back here. So we actually looked at each of the projects and figured out which of these goals apply to each of these projects. And then based on those projects, how are those projects and their current and their metrics going to contribute to the program? So these are all the performance metrics that were analyzed with the overall program. And we then consolidated that. And what you see here before you is actually the program level metrics that we'll be using to monitor and evaluate the overall program, and things like vehicle hours traveled, vehicle hours delayed, accident rates, average vehicle occupancy, VMT reduction, greenhouse gas reductions, transit and paratransit ridership, so we can determine how much mode shift we're getting in the corridor. And so we're looking at how to collect the data and measure and monitor these metrics and how they were respectively to all the different projects. One of the other things that the group is working on is developing the concept operations for the program. And so really the concept operation is a process for collaboratively developing the project. It really emphasizes stakeholder engagement in the project development process. And the concept operation really helps facilitates a common understanding about the issues, the challenges, the approaches, documents all the findings in terms of guiding and developing the overall system. This concept operations is really consistent with the system engineering approach required by FHWA for major ITS projects. And so what we're doing is we're developing a program level concept operations that do feed and integrate with the project level concept operation documentation. So as I mentioned earlier, the part-time transit lane, they have a draft concept operations. The mobility service and ADS grants will have their own concept operations. And also the advanced technology project will have its own concept operation. And so the Innovate 680 program is really intended to make sure that we really have truly developed a systems of systems to really manage the congestion on this corridor. And so one of the things that we do is we actually walk through scenarios. So then in this particular scenario that we walked with the Policy Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee is actually traveling in the corridor using a shared autonomous vehicle. And this is one operational scenario, and there's many others that we'll be looking at as part of the concept operations. And so this will be a rider opening up the Mobility on Demand phone app that we developed through the ATC MTE grant. The SAV picks up the rider at home. It travels to a shared mobility hub and picks up additional shoppers who may be going to local shopping in nearby destinations. And then the SAV travels through local roads and arterials to those destinations, and then they arrive at their destination. And the whole purpose of having a program level concept operation is there's many aspects of how this gets integrated. This is actually the system architecture. I know this is complicated, but I think it's really interesting to see how, as the development of the operational scenario, the grant, the mobility service grant develops the app and makes sure that these system or subsystems are integrated together. It then talks to the Caltrans District 4 TMC, and then it also talks to the Share Mobility Hub, curbside management, as well as the automated driving system for the SAV project. And then it also looks at the arterial system in terms of advanced transit signal priority systems, et cetera. And then they arrive at their destination. But the concept operation basically looks at how to coordinate and integrate all of these systems together to really truly get that systems of systems. So with the TAC ConOp working groups, we've had 5 workshops to date. We've talked about introducing the vision to the TAC ConOp group. We've talked about the advanced technology project, high capacity transit, share mobility hubs, as well as the mobility of service project. And really just these are high level introductory topics to the overall TAC. And right now we're actually getting ready to meet individually with all of the PLT and TAC members to be able to get their insight on some more detailed information on some of these topics. And we plan on bringing additional topics to them in the future. Something that Lindsay Willis, our Director of External Affairs, and her team is working on is a travel behavior study, which is extremely innovative. And I know Lindsay will be hopefully bringing an item to you in the future in terms of the findings and results of this travel behavior study. But we're working on this with as part of Convey's public outreach scope, and they've hired Root Solutions to do this travel behavior study. And the research is really conducted and will inform how we communicate to the public about these projects. But likewise, how does the public and how does their input will drive and inform and guide how we're developing the projects as well. And so right now we just completed the landscape analysis and getting ready to move into the next step, which is the behavior drivers analysis. And the overall timeline is we've completed the landscape analysis, and we're getting ready to in early 2021 to do a user analysis for that second step. One of the other things that Lindsay Willis and her team have developed is a brand for the entire program, and Innovate 680, imagining the possibilities. And so a number of public facing materials have been developed. We have a program website as well as project pages. We also have a brand new program brochure that illustrates the overall program and the projects. And we also have developed, and Lindsay is planning on developing and issuing a quarterly newsletter to kind of describe some of the progress of the overall program. Plus, her team has also developed a number of style guides to help guide the development of the documentation for the program, as well as technical templates for memos, agendas, etc., project fact sheets, as well as developing the online scoping, interactive online scoping meeting for the Express Lane completion project, which the comment period ended in July, and this was a very successful way because of COVID-19 to interact with the public during the scoping process for the environmental document. So with that, the recommendation is staff seeks authorization for the chair to execute MOU number 80.09.01 between the authority, MTC, and Caltrans to memorialize this governance structure for the Innovate 680 program. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions? Newell.
Yeah, that's first of all, fantastic presentation, Tim, and it's an exciting venture. And I think, people from all over the world is going to be looking at what we come up with and how this evolves. And I think the structure is well laid out. The concern I have, and it really is a question, is given that this is a data-driven basis to data-driven solutions, we have data that's so skewed right now. We don't have people using transportation systems. We don't have transit. It's a mess. So how do we, not use this? How do I say this? That it could skew it and make it look like, oh, we've done a great job. We reduced traffic. How do we account for this and base the decisions and everything going forward in a way that are reliable and more predictable? Because we're in a circumstance that is data void. It's got something that's interjected so foreign, so different. So I'm sure you guys have been talking about it, but maybe you could share with us what you're thinking and how do we compensate for this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. It's actually very interesting. We actually, because of COVID-19, as you're aware, the part-time transit lane project, the Shared Mobility Hub project are put on hold. And it's really give us an opportunity at the program level to really take a step back and kind of re-strategize in terms of the sequence of how we would deliver the program in the corridor. For example, we were very, very interested in really delivering this part-time transit lane project actually first in the quarter, but because of COVID, now we're taking a step back and thinking, well, maybe we actually more focus on the ramp metering component of the project as more of a delivery strategy. And so what we're doing is we're looking at data both post-COVID and also pre-COVID. And so the program team is actually pulling data off of the highway system as well as other sources to basically, we actually have a graph. I could actually show it to you if you'd like, but we actually have a graph of showing how traffic is actually traveling in the corridor on a weekly basis. And we're trying to evaluate and monitor exactly what's happening in the corridor and use that data to make better decisions about the direction we're taking the program. The other aspects of this is really the travel behavior study. So the travel behavior study is, I think, a tool that has even greater value than it did before in terms of reaching out to the public and understanding, how is COVID-19 really affecting their travel behaviors in the corridor in terms of telecommuting, or not using transit, or maybe relying more on single occupant vehicle, maybe riding their bike rather than getting in their car, or walking more. And so it's to help better understand. This travel behavior study is really going to be a great tool to better understand how travel is occurring in the corridor, to be able to inform how we're delivering the projects, how we're delivering the strategies in the corridor. So and so we are constantly talking about that actually at that strategic delivery team level, that yellow band area. We're talking about that on a monthly basis and really understanding, okay, because of COVID-19, what's the best way to deliver this program as it continues to evolve over the next number of years?
Great, Tim, thanks. I know it's a challenge, and it's pretty clear we'd all love to see traffic stay this way. It's good for the environment, but the sad part is we could make it even better if we could figure out a way to get people to go back to transit. But there's an inherent fear. There was security from BART. That hangover is still there. It's gotten worse in some ways. And the fact is that people don't want to congregate in those types of facilities. So big challenge there. But thank you.
Sorry, Julie.
Thank you. Sometimes it's best to make big movements, right? I just want to say this is exciting. The graphic presentation is stunning and very informative, and would love to have seen that in the packet, but that was probably a push on deadline. So if you could distribute that to all of us. And the other question is this going to be presented to the full authority? I think that would be a worthwhile investment of our time.
Yeah, we can present it to the full authority, and we'll make sure the presentation gets distributed.
Yeah, I think it would be really good for the rest of the team to see what we're working on and be able to help spread the word about it and let people know that we are continuing to do that innovation that we're so well known for, and brag a little. We need to do that. We need to get that out to the public. The public needs to know that we're still working.
Other questions? I had one. Tim, you said a couple of times that this project was on hold, but it sounds like there are a lot of things going on. Could you clarify that a little bit, please?
Yes, Chair, but there's a number of projects in the program. So there's 6 projects in the program. So there's only 2 projects out of the 6 projects that are actually on hold. That would be the part-time transit lane and the shared mobility hub. The other projects, the ADS, the MOS, the advanced technologies, the express lane project, those are all still moving forward.
Okay, this is an action item, and
We do have one more comment. Dave Campbell has a comment.
Randy, go ahead.
No,
Unmute.
Commissioner, Chair Butt, I was trying to signal that Dave Campbell has his hand up.
Oh, okay. I didn't see him. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Dave Campbell, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. I talked with Tim a while back about this, but Tim, can you remind us if the shared mobility hubs are on hold? Bike East Bay has particular interest in that and the first and last mile connections. Can you just update when can Bike East Bay and representatives of walking and biking participate in this exciting project?
Yeah, so as you're aware, Dave, we have that quarterly bike meeting with all the bike advocates. So that'll definitely be the avenue to coordinate with the bike advocate groups on Innovate 680, as well as you're able to participate, and go to the policy advisory committee meetings as well. But certainly with the Shared Mobility Hub project, we will be doing some active project-specific outreach with the public, with the public and the bike advocacy groups, to make sure that we're integrating those issues or discussions into the overall project. So both at the program level and also at the project-specific level, you'll see engagement.
Okay, any other hands up? Okay, I think it's time for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Well done.
Motion by Arner, second by, who seconded it? Geringer?
Pierce.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Okay, Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item is COVID-19 impacts on Measure J revenues. project evaluation and ranked list. This is going to be presented by Hisham.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. It's good to see everybody. I do have a presentation, so let me share my screen. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see the screen. Back in May 2020, you approved several measures to prepare us for COVID-19 impacts on our revenues. One of these measures is the temporary suspension of Measure J appropriations for capital projects. You also directed us to start building a reserve and also to start the development of an allocation plan to guide future appropriations of Measure J funds. In the past, when we projected major declines in our revenues as part of the strategic plan, we made corresponding cuts in future projects funding and reduced our commitments accordingly in the strategic plan. Since, as you know, we accelerated the delivery of most of our projects in the strategic plan, our ability to make cuts in future projects funding is now limited. That's why we're looking at the funding of ongoing projects now. Today, I'll be talking about the first step in the multi-step process to develop the allocation plan. When completed, the allocation plan will allow us to prioritize future Measure J appropriations to remaining projects based on an updated revenue forecast that takes into consideration COVID-19 impacts. It will also hopefully allow us to build a healthy reserve to absorb future declines in our revenues. You probably heard the good news this morning on our sales tax revenues. Despite the shutdowns in the last quarter, it looks like we dodged a major hit to our fiscal year 20 revenues. Overall, we had about 3.2% decline from the last fiscal year, from fiscal year 19. And that's much better than the 14% that we were anticipating back in May. And this chart shows our actual revenues and compares it to what we were projecting in the 2019 strategic plan. If you look at this solid line, that's our actual revenues, and the lower dotted line is the 2019 strategic plan projections. Happy to say that for the last 2 years, we've been slightly over our projections in terms of our sales tax revenues. With that said, I don't think anyone thinks we are out of the woods yet. Our budget for fiscal year 21 is about $16 million lower than what we projected in the 2019 strategic plan, which is significant. We still have 14 more years to go on Measure J. We need to take steps to ensure that by the end of the measure, our expenditures are in line with our revenues, that we're not exceeding the revenues and we're not spending money we may not have. One of the steps to allow us to do that is to build a healthy reserve to buffer us from future downturns in the economy, which will also help us ensure that we continue to have positive cash flow. Your quick action back in May of this year to approve Resolution 2019P allowed us to slow down our project expenditures while we figure out COVID-19 impacts on our revenues. The resolution directed staff to temporarily suspend appropriation of Measure J funds to local projects. The suspension basically applied to 32 local projects programmed in the strategic plan or are part of the TLC PIDBIKE programming documents. These 32 projects needed about $43.5 million in Measure J to continue. The resolution also directed staff to set aside any Measure J savings in a reserve to help cushion the impact of future economic downturns. We anticipate at this time, we anticipate about $4 million in savings on projects like the southbound 680 Express Lane project or the landscaping work on the Caldecott or the Highway 4 widening, among others. So once these numbers are finalized and we know exactly what the reserve numbers are, the savings amounts are, we will put them in a reserve. The resolution also continued the policy that we had in the 2019 strategic plan, which is to continue delaying the programming of next cycles of the TLC and the pit bike program. To prioritize Measure J appropriations, you also directed its staff in May to start developing an allocation plan, and you approved the principles to develop it. The principles are listed in the slide. I'm not going to read them for you. In general, excuse me. Sorry about that. I was saying the principles are listed in this slide, and in general, they favor projects that are shovel-ready and have federal and state funds that are at risk of being lost. Based on these principles, we developed the criteria you see in this slide to score the 32 projects. And in general, a project gets the maximum score if it needs Measure J as a match for state federal funds, if it had more than $10 million in state and federal funds on the project, if it can start construction by January next year, or if it's part of a larger project that is dependent on it being completed. So we applied these criteria to the 32 projects, and I want to thank my team here. That's led by James O'Brien, as well as Frank Ferger from the consulting team, as well as Stephanie and our planning staff who worked on this. In order to break the tie, when we applied the criteria to the projects, we had several ties. In order to break the tie between the projects scoring the same, we used the amount of federal and state funds at risk as a tiebreaker. If the project had no state or federal funds at risk, we used the ratio of total project to the Measure J funds as a tiebreaker. Over the past couple of months, as I mentioned, we asked every agency on this list to provide us up-to-date information on their projects. And we use that as a basis to do our scoring. And I'll show you the scoring in the next 3 slides. They're also included in your packet as attachment A. We presented the scoring criteria and the list of projects, the ranked list of projects to the TCC on August 20th, and they agreed with the approach and recommended approval. Just want to mention that after the TCC meeting, we did have to change the score on one of the projects. It was in Walnut Creek because we received updated information on that project. So it reflects that change. So as I mentioned, there are 32 projects that were scored. In order to do all of these 32 projects, we need $43.5 million in Measure J funds to be appropriated. But if you look at the top 14 projects, which are shown in this slide, basically, we only need $11 million to do them, and they will leverage approximately $54 million in state and federal money. So the list continues on this slide, and you have it in your packet, and I can send you a copy of the presentation after the meeting. and as well as this slide. We just to make sure everybody understands that we will be using this ranked list to prioritize future Measure J appropriations once we have a revenue forecast. We will also need to update it on a regular basis to reflect changes in funding. For example, some projects may get other fund sources, federal or state fund sources that could improve their scores and bring them up on the list in terms of ranking. Others might get fully funded by other sources and won't need our Measure J's funds, so they may drop from the list. So we're going to be updating this list on a regular basis. Maybe every quarter we'll bring it back to reflect changes. And also I want to emphasize we are not scoring these projects because, based on the project merits or their benefit cost ratio. All of these projects are important. That's why they had Measure J on them in the first place. The only reason we're scoring them now is because we don't think we have enough Measure J funds to do all of them. And we need to prevent the loss of the leveraged state and federal money. So we want to stretch our limited dollars as much as we can. So you will notice, the criteria is mostly based on funding. Now that we talked about the local projects, I want to talk about the CCTA managed project. We didn't only ask our sponsors to take the hit of COVID-19, but we're also looking at our own projects. So on a parallel track, we reviewed and scored all the projects that we're managing at CCTA, which have funding shortfall that are not fully funded. There are 13 of them. And we used similar criteria that looked at funds at risk, the amount of the shortfall on the project, as well as other funding related factors, as you can see in the slide. The amount of other funds on projects was used to break any ties as well. Projects that are being advanced by non-Measure J funds and with little shortfall basically scored the highest. Fully funded projects were not scored. These are ongoing projects that we need to continue in order not to lose other fund sources. We also didn't score studies because these studies have not yet produced specific projects for us to be able to assess their funding and cost information. And again, the goal here, all of these projects are important on our list, and the goal is just to make sure we save whatever funds we leveraged, state or federal funds we leveraged, and get the biggest bang for our limited dollars. So these are the list of projects that we scored. The first 10 are shown on this slide. There also the whole list with all the details are shown in attachment C in your packet if you need to look at it. And this is the rest of that list, the 13 projects we're talking about. These are the list of the ongoing projects that are fully funded. The first two, as you know, are under construction. We just cannot stop working on these. And this slide shows you the studies that we're working on. We didn't score them, as I mentioned, because the studies have not yet produced specific projects for us to be able to assess their cost or funding. So today, this is my final slide. Today, we are asking you to approve both lists shown in attachments A and C in your packet. We will bring you an updated forecast of our Measure J revenues, hopefully in the next few months, as soon as we have good data to base it on. There is a lot of uncertainty of what's happening to the economy. So we need to make sure when we're presenting you with a revenue forecast, it is realistic. We will use that forecast in our strategic plan financial model to determine how much we can appropriate in Measure J while maintaining a healthy reserve and ensuring our cash flow stays positive. Based on that, we will be able to tell you how many of the projects can receive their Measure J appropriations. And also at the same time, we will also bring you specific fund exchange proposals. We talked about that in the past. You directed us to look into it. We think there is at least one proposal that will result in a win-win situation for us and the other parties. That will bring it to you hopefully later in October, November timeframe. Finally, I'll be happy to answer any questions. That's the end of my presentation.
Questions by anybody? Newell.
Well, I would say it's probably not so much a question, but maybe it gets to that. It's being the city rep. You know, I understand we have to come up with some methodology. We have a event horizon of when Measure J ends. Our funds are done, so we have to have this plan in place. And I see that the heaviest weighting was those projects that had the most amount of matching funds or funds from other agencies. And I'm not sure that maybe that as a criteria is appropriate, as opposed to, is there another level of what percentage of that project came from that? There are also, and there's more than one city that's done this, that has given back funding because they found other sources. For example, there was one in Danville where it was voted on. It was part of the plan when Measure J was voted by the public to do that project. It ended up costing zero funds to CCTA. So this is a forward-looking, but you know, the cities are all in this to get their projects that they have promised. And now we're in the circumstance where revenues are different. But whether that was COVID or just non-COVID, we would still have to be doing this kind of a plan because in fact, there's X amount of revenues that we estimate. So I'm a little concerned on how projects were necessarily evaluated, whether or not it's comprehensive enough, because there's clearly winners and losers. And you could be a loser, not because you didn't have some matching funds, it's just that your dollar amount, even though maybe the percentage of the project could have been 50%, but if the dollar amount was small and somebody had a project that only funded 10% of other forces, so it didn't. It's sort of like, you know, was that the criteria? Would you go back and look at it that way? Is that another way to evaluate it? So it's really a comment. I'm concerned about this, and I think we need, and cities need time to really look at this and go back to each of our regional entities, let them come back and really weigh in. And there are others, from Bikey's Bay to other folks, that you know, are we achieving the goals of what Measure J? Are we achieving the things that people voted and tasked us to accomplish? And is this methodology encompassing enough to say, yes, we did all of those things? So I'll leave it at that and just have some real concerns and reservations.
Maybe we need another category called a wild card that has the kind of things Newell's talking about. Other questions or comments? Julie.
Yeah, you know, maybe I think Newell may be right. We may need another month on this one if we can do that, to brief our regional committees and be able to have a little more complete discussion and presentations there about how this works, just so that all of our jurisdictions are briefed on it before we make a final decision at CCTA. I don't know that we'll come up with any different answers, but I think we may get a better overview and a better comfort level with all of our jurisdictions if we do that. And I don't know that this is particularly time sensitive, but if it is, I'd like to hear that.
Mr. Chairman, can I comment? This is Hisham.
Who's on?
This is Hisham.
Okay, Hisham, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your comments, commissioners. It is not time sensitive. We have time, so we can go back to the RTPCs if we need to next month and brief them on the resulting lists. We did present it to TCC, and they did agree with the scoring criteria and the ranked list, at least for the local projects. Having said that, there's no harm of going back to the RTPCs to brief them about this. I just want to say that, you know, that we are in very unfortunate situation here because of COVID-19, and because we were able to accelerate most of the projects delivery in the strategic plan. We have very limited projects left in the strategic plan. So that's why we had to look at these ongoing projects that we already programmed and made commitments to. So having said that, I think the vision for this is once we have a revenue forecast, the revenue forecast will be able to tell us how far down the list we will be able to go. If it is optimistic and consistent with what we were projecting in the 2019 strategic plan, then basically everything on this list could be funded as long as we build a reserve. If it's not, if the revenue forecast is really bad, we may not be able to make any appropriations to these projects. So we still don't know where the line will fall. However, having said that, I think the commitment we're making is this is a prioritized list of projects that we will be working on funding, whether it's from Measure J or whatever sources we end up programming in the future, whether it is federal stimulus we get, future OBAG, potential STIP funds or other funds we end up being programming. So in our opinion, we probably shouldn't be going or doing another call for projects until the projects on these lists are funded first. Once they're funded and underway, then we can look at other projects to fund. So I just wanted to make that clear. Sorry if I didn't have a chance to mention it in my presentation.
Excuse me. Teresa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Hisham. You actually just hit on the question that I wanted to ask earlier. I do agree with Commissioners Arnrich and Pierce about not making a decision today or bringing it to this month's authority board meeting and taking it back out to the regional groups. One of the questions that I had, and I did speak early on with Tim, was about other funding sources and, each of our cities being able to work with the authority board, the authority staff to find other funding sources. So yes, I want to try and get as many of those lists, particularly to number 17, funded this year. But I also want to make sure that we're assisting all of our cities because we made these commitments, as Newell pointed out. And thank you for touching on that this is not the only funding source and that we're just stopping at that point, that we'll continue to look at how to fund these.
Randy, you had something? Unmute. Randy, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to add on to what Commissioner Geringer just said. So over the past decade, at least since I've been here, we used to keep a chart of all the grant funding, STIP savings, money swapping, and it was getting close to $250 million. And so if you look at today where we are, we've got 684 under construction. Why? Because we were able to get a little over $50 million from the state. If you look at other projects, we were able to get other monies like Sand Creek. Sand Creek wouldn't be built today, but it's built today. But we got a CMIA savings grant because we scour the universe, start with planet Earth, and actually focus in on the state and the feds to try to find money. And a lot of times, some projects that are typically eligible for grant money, they're not brought forward because you have measure money to, it's easier to get. And so we have pledged with several of you to go out and really scour the funding landscape to find those projects that are ready to go. So we have a list of projects that, whether they're federalized or not federalized, so you have more flexibility to get federal money. And so we're going to do our part to try to wave the magic wand, hopefully, and get some more money into our county to build these projects without going broke at the end of the day, because you still have to meet your expenditure and your revenue at the end of 2034. If you're like this, you don't have flexibility, and the last thing you want to do is to try to pass another funding initiative to close that gap. That's not what it's for. So we're, as staff, we're just trying to recommend so in 2034, you have more flexibility over the last 5 years to make those decisions and not be like this, but be like this. And so it's a tough decision now because it's getting later in the game, and there are projects that are ready to go. So that's really the bad part about this whole situation.
Tim Hale.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was going to say exactly what Randy just said in terms of making we meet the endpoints, but the other priority to this allocation plan is making sure that we build a really good cash reserve, so that way we can make that happen. So that because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 14 years, and so it's going to be important as we're going through this allocation plan that we have a really solid cash reserve to be able to account for other challenges or issues we might encounter over the next 14 years. And I wanted to comment on what Commissioner Arnrich said in terms of meeting our commitments. And so as we are getting towards the end of this measure, one of the things that staff is doing right now is we're actually going back through the strategic plan, going back through the expenditure plan, and making sure where have we satisfied our commitments in the expenditure plan, and where do we still have gaps, as well as we're also looking at the sub-regional equity aspects as well, because we are coming to the end of the measure in terms of the number of projects that are left. And so we need to make sure that we are making sure we meet our commitments relative to the allocation plan and the projects that we're identifying.
Noel?
Yeah, Jim, you said it perfectly there. I think what Randy said as well. We're going to be judged as an agency. We have the opportunity to extend this. We tried to add to this, but the value proposition to the public as in the next few years will be, what have we done? Is this worth extending? And how we treat the sunsetting of this agency and how closely we met all those goals. How do we do on our financing? Thank God Brian's, just great at trying to figure out every opportunity for refinancings to everything to make us the most cost-effective agency on so many levels. So the caution here of slowing down a tiny bit is that it's important that the methodology and all the equity, Tim, that you just talked about is carefully looked at so that we can outwardly look back to the public and say, we met all the goals in these areas. Here was the revenue. Here's how it was spent. And by the way, and I don't know if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but at some point in time, we have a great opportunity based on our success and our history of saying, do you want to extend this agency? And here's what else we're going to do. So critical phase, I think we should share this information with the board, on the full board, so everybody has the same knowledge base, but I don't think we should be asking for a final decision for another few months. And also, after getting those projections, as Brian talked about earlier, there's the big hit. Everybody's last year in sales tax was good, but don't forget, they're a quarter behind. All of us are. That's the way they pay. So the real hit is going to be a double whammy for this year for what we're seeing in the downturn. So we ought to have that information in hand. It will portend what the future is going to look like. What is recovery? It's not really going to see that till December. And that we won't know till March. So it is a ways away. This is great planning. It doesn't mean the work goes away. So I think we're headed the right way, but it's really important.
Okay, anyone else? It sounds like we have a consensus to hold this over and not take a vote on it today. So I think if staff withdraws the request for approval, we don't need to vote on this. Okay, that brings us to our closeout items. The first one is chair's comments and reports. I don't have any. Commissioners' comments and reports. Anybody have any? I don't see any. Executive staff comments. Randy?
I have a question really quickly. So we're going to still make this presentation to the board at the authority meeting, correct? Okay, all right. So one announcement, John Huang has passed probation yesterday. It's the fastest this anybody's ever gotten their 6-month probation report in on my desk, and it was like on the 6th month. So, we went through his performance, and he's doing a really good job. He's fitting in very well with our team, and he's a valued member of the team. So congratulations to John. And then I'm on a research project that is sponsored by the Transportation Research Board and UC Berkeley and the Institute of Transportation Studies on post-COVID transit. It was arranged by Dr. Susan Shaheen, and I think there's 14 experts and myself on this panel that's helping drive the research to get to where Dave Campbell was talking about. And so we've had, I think, 3 workshops, and there's a report that's going to be written on, what do we need to be doing as research-wise to get people back into transit where it's safe, having the right number of masks and those kinds of things. And also, what do we need to do as industry? So Uber, Remix, other representatives are on this panel. So hopefully we'll get a report out here pretty soon. So I wanted to announce that as well. Thank you.
Okay, any other business? Our next meeting will be October 1st at 8:30 a.m. And if there's, Randy?
Yeah, sorry, I have one other thing. So Interstate 680 HOV lane, 1 year early. We opened the lane 1 year early. But what Ivan is going to give you a report, but I'm going to steal some of his thunder. And so the landscaping project is important only because we've integrated a project into a project that typically, when one project ends, the other project starts. And so you've got this lull or a gap in the construction. So people drive down Interstate 680 and they see, oh, they finally finished. And then, oh, you see construction area signs go back up, and then they're doing something else. So it seems like 680 is always under construction. So the idea from a customer satisfaction perspective, Ivan and I we made the decision to couple those together. So you're doing the construction all at once. The other thing that's happening is they're paving now. So they open the lane, they're going to resurface the roadway as we committed to Caltrans, and we're doing that at night. If you think about oil prices today, and oil prices, because you wouldn't pave, if you didn't pave this season, you would start probably in April of next year. So those prices are going to, in theory, going to be higher. So there's a cost savings as well of that acceleration, not only because, sorry, Commissioner Arnovich, we had to lengthen some of these CM contracts out to deal with certain things, but the other CM contract, the main one on the HOV lane, that is going like this. So that is getting more narrow, and you're saving a lot of money there as well. And you're saving potential money on the price of oil when we're doing these overlays, because we got a CPI adjuster in the contract. So I wanted to mention that. So hats off to Ivan for working on that. He's got all those issues that we talked about on 684, and it's my hair is getting grayer and grayer all the time because these projects are complex, and we were able to work with the water board, who's the executive officer I met a while ago, and he's a very, very fair person. And so we made the phone call over there and I mean, we could blast through 25 feet of solid rock to put these detention basins, but really, does that achieve what you want to achieve? On this, as rocks are flying all over Buchanan Airport's right there. We got all these other issues. We're able to negotiate a nice modification to the agreement. Plus, as I told him, we have 4 other segments to that interchange where there isn't solid rock, where we can put detention basins in and things like that. So I think our network is pretty strong, and we have pretty good relationships with our partners. And so I think that I just wanted to mention that as well. So thank you, Ivan, for persevering in all these issues. I know it's a difficult. Some projects are more difficult than others, and I think Commissioner Pierce's #1 priority, 684, is a very difficult and complex project. So thank you for letting me add that as well.
And thank you all for persevering, because you are innovating and making these projects come in ahead of schedule, under budget, doing a fabulous job. You're showing our taxpayers where their dollars are going. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? If not, we'll see y'all at our regular CCTA meeting on the 16th or something like that.
Have a great day,
United-
birthday boy, Randy.
And at Mayor's Conference tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And happy birthday, Randy.
Yeah, Randy, take the rest of the day off, okay?
Bye.